Welcome back from the break, Rams. I'm Emma Iannacone here with Dick and Margaret Miller from the class of 1964. Dick, you were the first philosophy major at CSU, correct?
That's correct. Not the first graduate.
Not the first graduate.
Somebody transferred in and graduated out a quarter before I did.
Oh, he stole the title right out from under you.
And realized it took me years to realize it didn't make a bit of difference.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what CSU was like back in '64. You were an English major, correct?
Yes. In 1960, when we started, the honors program was just getting started then, and they had honors classes for freshman English, and they had honors classes for the beginning history course, and I think those were the only ones. And we were both in both of those honors classes.
Oh, wow. So you were also one of some of the first honors students at CSU.
Yes.
Wow. What was the program like back then?
Had some absolutely phenomenal teachers that taught us to read better than we had, to think better than we had. Although I do remember getting a comment on an essay I wrote on King Lear, where I tried to argue that the behavior of his daughters Goneril and Regan was understandable for the age, and got the note back from Mr. Cash saying that he despaired of my debate training.
Oh, wow.
But Mr. Cash was wonderful for my social life. The first thing I remember was that he got us all together in a big circle and had us each introduce ourselves and tell something about ourselves. And so I reported that my family had a pet alligator, which was true. At that time, my younger brother, who was 3 years younger than I, had a friend who moved to Florida, and this boy sent us a live alligator, which I found in the mailbox in a box marked live alligator. So my father managed to keep this poor reptile alive, although it never really flourished and didn't ever get very big. But I thought that was something that would be sort of interesting. So this young man next to me, the one that's sitting next to me now, said, her alligator bites her fingernails. And of course, I was the one that bit my fingernails. So, so I eliminated him from my secret agenda, which was to get my MRS degree, although I told my parents that I was here to get a major in English and minor in education and be a high school or junior high teacher.
But you had a secret agenda the whole time.
It was, yes. And the honors program was a great help in that. It had many, even after I eliminated Dick, it had many other young men that I considered very possible. So I sort of thought of myself, it was way before the TV program, but I was kind of like the Bachelorette. You know, I was sort of hoping that the one that I picked out would also like me too.
So if you had eliminated him, then how did he win you over in the end?
That would be second quarter. We were on the quarter system then, and we came back after Christmas, and I had not seen him because I didn't realize that he had dropped out of school to have back surgery. And Mr. Cash had a wonderful little farm out south of town, beyond where the first McDonald's is, and he invited us, the whole class, out to his farm for a party inside his farmhouse with his family. And I re-met this young man, and I sort of remembered, although it was a blessing in disguise because I stopped biting my fingernails as of that day. And I was ready to go home from the party, and the people that had brought me were not ready to leave yet. And he was willing to take me home in his car. And I figured once I found out that his father was assistant dean of students that it was probably safe to get in the car with him.
Yeah.
And he was a wonderful conversationalist and kept me entertained all the way home, and that was the start of our dating.
How sweet. So tell me a little bit of background on the philosophy department, how that got started, and how you became the first major in the department.
Well, I came here not having any idea of what I was going to do. I just looked at what I'd done well in high school. And so I was a math major. Turned out I didn't get along with my advisor. And I subsequently, years later, I told my parents, and they said, you know, one of your best friends in high school's father was the vice chair of the math department. Why didn't you go talk to him and say you need a different advisor? And I said I didn't know I could. So instead I became arts and sciences undecided. And I guess faculty in the arts and sciences were randomly assigned such students. And I drew a fellow that I was very happy with because he was a friend of the family, a fellow by the name of Willard Eddy, after whom Eddie Hall is named. And he had come here with a master's in English and a master's in philosophy. And by that point, he had persuaded the university that there was more demand for philosophy courses. So by the time I was there, I think my freshman year, I think there was one other philosopher, my sophomore year, two. And they started having this sort of directed philosophy program, and it was his ambition to have a philosophy department. And I guess the third year, two more people came. Now they had 5 philosophers, plus Tom Mark, who taught English, but he taught a philosophy of literature or something. And so they applied, and the arts and sciences people said, okay, you can have a major. And since I was there and Willard was my advisor, he said, you want to sign the form to be a philosophy major instead of undecided, which would have been, I guess, at the beginning of my sophomore year. And I said, yeah, that'd be nice. I had no idea what you do with a degree in philosophy, but I enjoyed my philosophy classes. And so I became a philosophy major. Didn't get to be the first graduate because a fellow transferred in ahead, who was ahead of me, and but maintained a relationship. In fact, I gave John Didier, I found the letter from Willard Eddy when I was finishing graduate school, that I wrote back to say, is there a chance there's a job at CSU? And he said, no, there are no jobs here at all. So I scouted around and wound up going to what was then the University of Missouri-Rolla. I was in contact with CU at the time, and the guy said, can you tell me what you're being offered so I know whether we have a chance? And I told him, and he said, for heaven's sakes, take it.
Wow, that's really interesting. So unfortunately, we're all out of time, but I want to hear more about CSU back in the 60s later on. That's all the time we have for this episode of Humans of CSU. Rams, thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in tomorrow night for CTV's news show with me and Ryan Christ. Have a good night.